Welcome back to our Black Screen podcast, the Unsearching series. This episode is called The Thought Before the World Begins, a journey into the unseen origin of your experience. You'll hear this message in 7 parts, each inviting you into a more intimate relationship with your own mind. We won't ask you to believe anything, only to remember that before there was a world outside you, there was a thought within you. Let the screen go dark. Let the body rest. Let the awareness stay. The listening begins now. Part 1. Before the world was word. What lives in you before you speak? Before your mouth opens, before your hands act, before the world calls your name and you respond, there is a presence. And that presence is not random. It is the origin of everything you are about to say, do, and become. It is thought. Quiet, perhaps. Invisible, certainly. But it is the first ripple, the beginning of your world. Most of us move so quickly that we forget this. We assume our life is built by choices and actions, as if behavior alone holds the key. But choice is only the middle step. Action is the outermost layer. The root, the true beginning, always begins in thought. You cannot do what you have not first imagined, even if the imagining was subtle or unconscious. You cannot feel what you have not at some level thought into being. This is not a metaphor. Thought is not just a mental activity. It is a creative force, a frequency, a signal broadcast into the field of existence. Everything you see, everything you touch, everything you fear or long for was once only a thought in someone's awareness. The chair, the phone, the house you live in, the sadness you carry, the love that changed you, all of it began in the unseen. And so did you. You began as a thought. This is more than poetic. This is sacred architecture. The design of the entire cosmos follows this sequence: thought, energy, manifestation, creation, movement, form. To be human is to be a miniature reflection of this very process. You are always thinking, and in thinking, you are always creating. But if this is true, then the question that quietly arises is this: what am I thinking into being without even knowing it? This is not a question meant to induce guilt or self-surveillance. It is not about controlling your mind with rigid positivity or pretending you never struggle. Rather, this question is an invitation to return to the sacred threshold, that moment before the world takes shape around you, that space where you still have the power to choose what direction your reality will lean toward. The truth is, most people live their lives reacting to form. They respond to what already exists, to what is already happening, to the echoes of past creations that have now taken physical shape. And so they remain trapped in cycles they never realize they initiated. They think the world is happening to them, but in reality, they are walking through their own thought forms made visible. Thought is not passive. It moves, it pulses, it has a weight, a color, a charge, and it does not vanish when unspoken. It accumulates, it signals, it interacts with the field of energy that surrounds you. Each thought you hold emits a vibration. That vibration becomes a blueprint. That blueprint becomes a pattern, and that pattern eventually meets you in physical life. The most extraordinary thing about this is also the most terrifying. You are not waiting for the future. You are composing it. Every time you allow a belief to settle inside you and become real, you send instructions into the field of possibility. Whether those instructions are based on fear or on truth is entirely up to you. Thought is the first domino. It might fall quietly, but it begins everything. That is why a single honest thought has more power than 1,000 empty affirmations. You can speak endless words, but if the thought beneath them contradicts what you say, the field listens to your thought, not your voice. This is why you can say you believe in abundance and still feel scarcity. You can tell someone you're fine and still ache with grief. The outer signal may be polished, but it is the inner pulse that shapes what comes next. This is also why stillness matters. Silence is not the absence of thought. It is the space in which you can become aware of what you are actually thinking. Most people are afraid of silence because it reveals them to themselves. The moment you stop distracting yourself with motion, noise, or obligation, your thoughts become visible. Not because they are new, but because you finally stopped long enough to witness them. And when you witness them, you gain a choice. You can keep feeding a thought, or you can dissolve it. You can amplify it, or release it. You can see a thought of fear and say, I understand why I once needed to think that, but I no longer choose to. That alone can shift the energetic pattern that was already starting to form around it. Because intention rewrites thought, and thought rewrites reality. This is not about denial. You do not need to banish difficult thoughts. You do not need to shame yourself for thinking something unpleasant or painful. But you can decide whether a thought is your truth or a residue. Whether it is a seed you wish to plant or one you are ready to compost and return to the earth. Before the world becomes word, it becomes thought. And you are not just a thinker. You are a thought shaper, a signal sender, a frequency carrier. Every time you think, you are speaking in a language the universe knows how to hear. It is important, then, to understand what kind of thoughts carry the greatest power. It is not the thought that is clever. It is not the thought that sounds intelligent or lofty. It is the thought that is sincere, rooted, vibrationally aligned with what is real. A thought infused with clarity is more potent than 100 thoughts wrapped in anxiety. This is why those rare moments of certainty, when you feel completely aligned, when you know something in your bones, seem to move mountains. Those thoughts are not just ideas. They are transmissions. They change the air around you. They call in new people, new timelines, new outcomes. They echo through the field and return to you, sometimes with astonishing speed. And here's the hidden truth. You are always in that field. You are not separate from it. You are not whispering into a void, hoping someone hears. You are immersed in the very ocean that responds to thought. You are the ripple, the wave, and the current. You are not a visitor in this realm of creation. You are a native. So if your reality feels stagnant, distorted, or chaotic, begin not with what is happening around you, but with what has been happening inside. Before the world was word, before sound, before circumstance, before movement, there was thought. There still is, right now, in this moment. So the real question becomes, what shall I think now? And do I dare to think something I have never thought before? Part 2. The first spark. There is a moment that comes before every movement, a pause, a breath, a stirring that begins in silence, invisible to the eye, yet radiant in its origin. This moment is the birthplace of power. It is the first spark. The first spark is not loud. It does not explode across the sky like lightning. It does not demand attention or arrive with fanfare. It is subtle, pure, immediate, and yet it holds the potential to set entire worlds into motion. This is the nature of thought. It is the first spark that gives rise to energy, and from energy, all things are made. You are taught to measure power by its result: a storm, a decision, a breakthrough. But what if power is not in the event, but in what precedes it? What if creation begins not in what you do, but in what you allow to be born inside your awareness, before a single step is taken? Every creation begins within. It does not begin when you build the house. It begins when you imagine living in it. It does not begin when you write the words. It begins when the feeling of those words first swells in your chest. Even love, which so many believe to be found through actions or gestures, does not truly begin with touch. It begins in thought. The instant you decide, "This matters to me," love has already taken root. The first spark is thought in its original form. It is the moment when possibility awakens and begins to move, not because you forced it, but because you allowed it. You became still long enough for the idea to arrive, and in that moment, something eternal began to flow through you. You have done this 1,000 times, maybe more. Every time you've had a hunch, a vision, a pull towards something you couldn't yet explain, that was the first spark, and often it came without effort. You didn't manufacture it, you received it. The idea simply appeared, as if from nowhere. But it was not nowhere. It came from the infinite field of potential that surrounds and flows through you. It came because you were open, and in that openness, you became a vessel of creation. The truth is, the universe does not begin with movement. It begins with stillness. In that stillness, thought arises, and thought becomes energy. Energy is the bridge between formlessness and form. When you think, you generate energy. That energy carries a frequency, and that frequency begins to move through the quantum field like a signal sent out to the unknown. The field responds, not by deciding for you, but by reflecting your signal back to you in the form of opportunities, circumstances, and sensations that match your internal state. This is not magic. This is coherence. The universe is intelligent. It is made of patterns, feedback, and resonance. What you send, you receive. What you focus on, you strengthen. What you believe, you eventually experience, not because belief is wishful thinking, but because belief is concentrated thought held over time. It accumulates energy. It gives instructions to the fabric of reality. The first spark is the instruction. When you hold a thought, especially a clear, emotionally infused one, you activate the field around you. And just like the early flicker of a fire, it may be small at first. It may look like nothing has changed. But something has been set in motion. The spark has touched dry kindling. Air has moved. Temperature has shifted. You may not see the flame yet, but it is coming. Because the spark did not disappear. It became something else. This is how manifestation works, not through force, through sequence. You do not have to control everything to create what you need. You do not have to know every step. You do not have to predict how your desires will arrive. You only need to become intentional at the origin point. That is your place of power, the place where you say, "I choose to think something new." That choice is the spark, and it must be honored. Most people ignore this first moment. They think it doesn't matter what passes through their mind if they don't act on it. They believe that casual thoughts are harmless. But thoughts are not casual. They are currents. They leave impressions. They set trajectories. If a thought returns to you often, it is not random. It is either a reflection of what you believe or a signal of what you are being called to examine, change, or claim. And this applies to everything, from the way you view yourself to the way you interpret your future. Imagine, for example, a person who constantly thinks, "I am behind in life." This single thought, if repeated, becomes more than an idea. It becomes a lens, a filter. That filter distorts their view of time, value, and possibility. And so, even when new chances arrive, they interpret them through the distortion. They feel late, they act out of fear, they mistrust their own pace, all because a single spark was allowed to grow into a flame that was never questioned. Now imagine a different thought. I am exactly where I need to be for what is emerging in me now. If this thought is fed, watered, and trusted, it becomes a seed of calm. And that calm allows for clarity. That clarity gives birth to inspired action. The person no longer rushes, panics, or compares. They begin to flow. They begin to notice. They begin to move with the rhythm of their own soul. And it all began with a spark, a thought they dared to think, a frequency they chose to tune into. This is why self-awareness matters. You are never just thinking. You are sending, and the field is always listening. But here's the beautiful paradox. Thoughts are powerful, and yet they are yours to release. You are not a prisoner of the thoughts you've had before. You are not destined to repeat every belief you inherited. You can think again. You can think better. You can choose a thought that aligns with life instead of fear, with healing instead of harm, with trust instead of torment. And when you do, you change the signal. Even if nothing outside you shifts right away, something within you already has. And that is the new spark. It may not roar at first, but it's real. It's glowing. And if you nurture it, it will catch. It will grow. It will guide. Creation begins here, at the very beginning, with the thought before the thought, the impulse before the idea, the quiet whisper of what might be possible, before the world rushes in to tell you it is not. So be gentle with the spark. Do not rush to shape it too soon. Let it breathe. Let it form. Let it hum in your chest for a while before you try to explain it. Sometimes the most powerful thoughts are the ones you carry like warmth, not the ones you try to define. This is the art of sacred thinking, of letting the first spark be enough for now, because it is not the flame that begins the fire. It is the willingness to receive the spark, even when the world is still cold. You are already holding the match. Part 3. The echo of your mind. There is something about thought that most people miss. It does not vanish. It does not slip into silence and disappear as soon as it arises. It echoes. It resounds through your body, your energy, and into the unseen spaces that surround you. Even the quietest thought has a footprint, a ripple that travels farther than you imagine. You do not need to shout for the universe to hear you. You only need to think with feeling. That is what makes thought powerful. It is not just an idea you hold in your mind. It is a signal that reverberates through your entire field. When you think something, you are not simply witnessing a concept. You are broadcasting a message. You are sending out a frequency that says, "This is what I am willing to align with." That frequency becomes your echo. It bounces through the field of energy that encircles all things. And because reality is participatory, that field begins to respond. Not to what you hope, not to what you pretend, but to what you really think. This is the difference between appearance and resonance. You can behave one way, speak in a certain tone, act in accordance with what others expect, and still send out a completely different signal from the one you're trying to portray. The universe does not respond to appearances. It responds to truth. And your most honest thoughts carry the loudest echoes. That is why you may find that certain patterns keep repeating in your life. It is not because you are cursed, unlucky, or flawed. It is because a particular thought has become so familiar, so woven into your perception of yourself and the world, that its echo never fades. The field receives it again and again, and gently mirrors it back to you through experiences, relationships, and events that carry the same vibration. This is not punishment. This is instruction. Life is not trying to harm you. It is trying to show you what you are emitting. You may say, "I want love," and yet carry a thought that says, "I am not worth being chosen." The echo of that thought is stronger than the surface-level desire. It creates a subtle tension between what you ask for and what you expect. That tension sends out mixed signals, and when the universe responds, it does so in kind, bringing you experiences that reflect the contradiction inside you. This is not something to be afraid of. It is something to become aware of, because once you notice the echo, you can trace it back to the original thought, and you can ask yourself with honesty and care, do I still want to carry this? Some thoughts are inherited. They are not yours, but you held them long enough that they began to sound like your own voice. Some thoughts are born from wounds. They were survival mechanisms that helped you cope when you were small, unprotected, or unseen. And some thoughts are choices, deliberate, conscious, powerful choices that you made in alignment with your highest self. Your task is not to condemn the old echoes. Your task is to learn from them, to feel into the thoughts that created them, and if they no longer serve your becoming, to let them fade. When a thought is no longer fed, its echo diminishes. This is how the field begins to change, not by force, but by gentle redirection of thought toward alignment. So how do you know which thoughts are shaping your world? You listen, not just to what you say, but to what you feel when no one is watching. You notice the tone of your inner voice when you make a mistake. You observe the stories that arise when you're tired, vulnerable, or alone. You sit with your discomfort instead of escaping it, and you let it speak, because it will tell you the truth. There is no need to fear the truth. There is only the need to understand it. If you want to know what your deepest thoughts are saying, you do not need a journal full of affirmations. You need presence. And you need to become quiet enough to hear what your mind repeats in the background of your life. Those background thoughts are the ones with the strongest charge. They are the ones shaping your path, not because they are more powerful in essence, but because they are more consistent. Repetition gives energy momentum, and over time, momentum becomes experience. But just as repetition created the echo, it can also dissolve it. You can introduce new thought patterns, you can practice new mental rhythms, and slowly, the old echoes begin to fade. This is how healing happens on a vibrational level. It is not just about understanding where a belief came from. It is about choosing again and again to introduce a different signal into the field, one that is more honest, more compassionate, more reflective of who you are becoming, not who you were. A single thought, held with clarity and consistency, can alter your entire trajectory. You do not need 100 perfect thoughts. You need one resonant one, and you need to return to it like a sacred chord. Each time you do, the echo strengthens, and life begins to harmonize with it. This is why people who deeply trust themselves appear so calm. They are not without doubt, but they are faithful to their thoughts. Their thoughts are not chaotic, they are anchored in coherence, and so their experience begins to match that inner order. You can do the same. You are not at the mercy of your mind. Your mind is a tool. You can shape it, guide it, nurture it. You can pause before speaking, slow down before reacting, and ask, what thought is echoing right now? That question is enough to change everything, because awareness interrupts automatic patterns, and the moment you become aware of your thought, you return to choice. That is where your true power lives, not in pretending to never think negative things, not in trying to fix every mental loop in a single day, but in remembering that you are never without the ability to introduce a new vibration into the field. You can do this in silence, in solitude, even in the midst of chaos. When you think a thought of kindness, you send out an echo that softens the air around you. When you think a thought of worthiness, you invite reality to treat you with respect. When you think a thought of peace, even while others are in conflict, you begin to hold a field that invites resolution. And when you think a thought of love, real love, not fantasy, you create a resonance that is impossible to ignore. This is how your life begins to change, not by forcing outcomes, but by changing the echo. Because thought is never a private matter. It is intimate, yes, but it is also relational. Every thought you have, every belief you rehearse, every vision you hold, interacts with the invisible systems around you. And those systems are listening, responding, mirroring. You are not lost in your mind. You are connected through it. So let your mind become a sacred chamber. Let it become a place where only thoughts that serve truth are welcomed. Let it become a place where echoes are kind, coherent, and clear. This is not about perfection. It is about resonance. You are already echoing. You are already shaping. The only question that remains is, what signal will you send next? Part 4. Belief as momentum. There is a moment when thought becomes more than just a flicker. It gathers force. It gains speed. It loops back into itself, feeding on the energy it generates. That moment is when thought becomes belief. And once something becomes a belief, it moves with momentum. Belief is thought that you have rehearsed until it became part of your structure. It is no longer just a passing idea. It has become part of the scaffolding through which you view the world, interpret events, make decisions, and anticipate what will come next. Most people do not examine their beliefs, and so they live within the boundaries of assumptions they never consciously chose. But belief is not fixed, it is sustained, and anything that is sustained can also be released. To understand how belief creates momentum, you must first see how the mind organizes reality. Your brain is not a neutral observer. It is a pattern-seeking instrument. When a thought repeats, your brain begins to treat it as important. The more often it is repeated, the more real it feels. Not because it is true, but because it is familiar. And familiarity is powerful. Familiarity creates comfort, even in pain. This is why people cling to beliefs that harm them. The belief may say you will never be enough, or love always leaves, or people are dangerous, and still, they return to it. Not because they enjoy it, but because it is known. And the known feels safe, even if it keeps them small. Every time you think a thought, you feed it. You build neurological connections. You embed it deeper into your field. If that thought aligns with wholeness, it empowers you. If that thought aligns with fear, it shrinks you. But either way, it gains momentum, and momentum shapes reality. Belief becomes the filter through which energy flows. It colors everything. You can stand in a garden and miss the flowers if your belief says beauty is for others. You can be offered love and reject it if your belief says, I am not ready. You can live with open doors and still feel imprisoned if your belief says freedom is dangerous. So what happens when you change a belief? Everything. Because when a belief changes, the momentum shifts direction. It does not stop abruptly. Beliefs, especially deeply embedded ones, have inertia. But the moment you begin to think something new with consistency, you interrupt the old trajectory. You plant new seeds in the mental soil. And if you return to those seeds with care, they take root. They sprout. They begin to stretch outward. Slowly, gently, they become the new dominant frequency. This is how healing unfolds, not as an event, but as a turning. It begins when you notice the old belief that has shaped your path for years. You look at it without judgment. You see how it served you once, perhaps even protected you. Then you choose to let it rest. You do not fight it. You do not try to prove it wrong. You simply stop feeding it. And in its place, you offer something new. A new thought, a new signal, a new voice in your own mind that says, "What if I was never broken to begin with?" Or, "What if I am already worthy of the life I imagine?" That thought may feel foreign at first. It may not land easily. But if you return to it again and again, you begin to shift the weight. Belief is not rigid. It is a rhythm. You can change it by altering the beat. And this matters more than you realize, because belief is what determines what you see. Not what exists, what you see. You and someone else can be standing in the same place, receiving the same information, offered the same opportunity, and walk away with entirely different experiences. Because belief filters perception. It tells you what is possible, what is likely, what is safe, and your nervous system, your decisions, your emotions all respond to that filter. That is why new belief is such a radical act. When you choose to believe something that contradicts your history, you are not ignoring the past. You are refusing to be ruled by it. You are saying, "I acknowledge what has been, and now I choose something else." That moment is powerful because it redirects the momentum of your entire life. This is why some people experience rapid transformation after years of feeling stuck. It is not that their circumstances suddenly changed. It is that they began to think differently. And that different thinking altered their vibration. That altered vibration interacted with the field in a new way. And reality, as always, responded to the dominant frequency. You may ask, but what if I don't believe the new thought yet? What if it feels fake? The answer is this. Belief is not about pretending. It is about practice. You don't need to force belief. You only need to become willing to entertain it. You begin by saying, "What if this were true?" You feel into it. You sit with the resonance. You notice what parts of your being soften in response. You observe what parts resist. You do not shame the resistance. You simply keep practicing the thought. And one day, without even realizing it, the thought becomes real. Not because you willed it into truth, but because you made room for it. You turn toward it often enough that your mind, your heart, your body began to recognize its signal. The new belief begins to replace the old, not by force, but by frequency. That is the essence of momentum. It follows where energy flows most consistently. When you shift your energy, the momentum eventually follows. This is not a spiritual cliché. This is how your entire system operates. Belief generates feelings. Feelings generate behavior. Behavior shapes experience. And experience feeds back into belief. It is a loop. You can enter it at any point, but the most powerful entry is thought, because it is the origin. That is where the loop begins. And if you change what begins the loop, you change everything that follows. This is why every transformation you have ever had started not with a plan, but with a realization. A moment when a new thought struck you with clarity, and you said, "I never saw it that way before." That one thought lit a new path. It opened a new way of being. And even if it took time, even if it was messy, the momentum had already shifted. You do not need to change everything all at once. You need only choose the next thought that reflects the truth you now prefer. Maybe the old belief was necessary once. Maybe it was inherited. Maybe it was taught by someone who meant well. But you are no longer required to carry it. You are free to choose again. And every time you do, the universe responds, not out of judgment, not as reward, but through the principle of coherence. The field aligns with what is held with consistency. And belief, above all else, is the most consistent form of thought. So what do you believe? Not what you say you believe. What you really believe about yourself, about life, about what you are allowed to have, to be, to feel. That is the real work, not to manipulate the world into giving you something, but to recognize the beliefs that have shaped your experience and to decide whether they are still worthy of you. Because your beliefs are powerful. They are not quiet opinions. They are energetic commands. And you are always commanding something. Part 5. Thought, Energy, and Emotion. There is a triad within you. Thought, energy, and emotion. They are not separate. They are not steps in a sequence. They are three expressions of the same current flowing through you. Every thought carries energy. That energy expresses itself as emotion. And that emotion creates movement. Inside your body, within your relationships, across the unseen networks that connect you to all things. To understand this triad is to understand how your inner world becomes your outer experience. Let us begin with thought. Thought is the spark. It is the initial pattern that forms in the quiet space of your awareness. Thought is like a tuning fork. It vibrates. It sends out a frequency into the vast field of possibility. That frequency is not static. It has character. It has weight. It has a feeling tone. Even before you name the feeling, the vibration is already there. That vibration is energy. The moment a thought is held, especially if it is charged with clarity or belief, it radiates. It becomes a current. That current flows through your nervous system, through the field around you, through every layer of your being. The energy of that thought is not passive. It seeks coherence. It interacts with your body, your memory, your environment. It searches for resonance. This is where emotion enters. Emotion is the experience of energy in motion within your being. It is the felt response to the energy your thought generated. It is not random. It is not disconnected from cause. You feel because you have first thought. You emote because something has already been set in motion. Most people believe emotion just happens, that it arrives without warning and cannot be traced. But emotion is not random. It is rooted. It comes from something. And that something is often a thought that was so familiar you didn't even realize it had already passed through you. You might not hear the thought that says, "I'm not safe," but you will feel the tension it creates. You might not notice the thought that says, "I'm all alone in this," but the ache in your chest will tell you it's there. You might not catch the thought that says, "This always goes wrong," but the tightening in your gut reveals its presence. Emotion is your body translating energy into sensation. It is your inner world trying to get your attention. And this is not something to be feared. It is something to be honored, because emotion is a messenger. It is not here to punish you. It is here to point you toward the thought that needs your awareness. When you feel, you are being invited to return to the source, to trace the feeling back to the signal that generated it. And in doing so, you are offered the chance to choose again. You are not your emotions. You are the one who notices them. You are not your thoughts. You are the one who can witness and redirect them. You are not your energy. You are the conductor of it. This is what it means to be sovereign. Sovereignty is not control. It is presence. It is the ability to remain with yourself, even in discomfort, and say, "Something has arisen. I will listen. I will respond. I will not run." And when you respond, you do not need to fix everything. You do not need to force yourself to feel something different. You only need to bring awareness to the thought that created the vibration. Often, this alone softens the energy. the emotion shifts, not because you pushed it away, but because you allowed it to complete its movement. Emotion, when honored, becomes guidance. It shows you what thoughts are active in your field. It reveals what energies you are carrying. It invites you to align with something more true, more kind, more spacious. This is why emotional honesty matters. When you suppress emotion, you disconnect from the energy that's trying to reveal itself. You block the current. You slow the release. But when you allow emotion to rise, to speak, to be felt fully, you allow the energy to keep moving. And in that movement, healing occurs. Emotion is not weakness. It is data. It is energy with a message. It is thought made felt. So the question becomes, what thoughts are you feeling? Because once you see the link between what you think and what you feel, you begin to reclaim your power. You stop believing that your moods are dictated by fate or by others. You begin to notice the pattern. You start to hear the thoughts you didn't realize you were rehearsing. Thought, they always leave. Energy, contraction, a pulling away. Emotion, sorrow, resentment, fear. But now you see it. Now you know it. Now you can ask, is that belief still true? Is it still mine? And if it is not, you can release it. You can choose a different thought. That new thought generates a different energy. That energy generates a new emotion. And that emotion becomes a new signal in your field. This is not about denying pain. Pain is a real and valid part of the human experience. But suffering often comes from the stories we attach to pain, and those stories are born in thought. So if you want to change the emotional weather of your life, do not start by trying to control your feelings. Start by becoming gentle with your thoughts. Offer yourself better ones, not false ones, not fantasies, but thoughts that align with the truth of who you are becoming. Thoughts that carry coherence. Thoughts that restore rhythm to your system. A thought like, I am allowed to be supported. I am not late. I am in rhythm with something deeper. I am no longer the child who had to carry everything alone. These thoughts are not empty. They carry charge. They emit frequency. They shift your vibration, and that shift begins to change your emotional tone, not instantly, not dramatically, but with gentle constancy. This is the real power. You do not need to wait for your environment to change before you feel peace. You do not need to wait for someone to apologize before you feel release. You do not need to wait for the world to affirm your worth before you feel whole. You can choose the thought. That thought generates energy. That energy gives rise to emotion. And that emotion creates a resonance that moves through your life like a new current. You are the current. You are the signal. You are the feeling waiting to be chosen. So begin with one small thought. Let it be kind. Let it be true. Let it be yours. And let it move you. Part 6. The hidden power of what you imagine. Close your eyes for a moment. See a path that does not yet exist beneath your feet. Feel the warmth of a home you have not yet entered. Hear the sound of laughter that has not yet been shared with others. All of it, right now, can be imagined. And none of it is pretend. Imagination is not a child's escape. It is not fantasy. It is not an illusion to grow out of. It is a portal, a living frequency, a sacred tool of creation. What you imagine is not limited to your private mind. It is your first communion with what could be. And it is no less real than anything you have already touched. If thought is the spark and emotion is the current, then imagination is the architect. It gives shape to formlessness. It gives direction to the energy you emit. It creates structure where there was only haze. Your imagination is not entertainment. It is instruction. The images you hold within you are translated into the language of frequency, and that frequency speaks directly to the field around you. This is why what you imagine matters. Not just the obvious thoughts, success, partnership, healing, but the quiet, repeated images, the ones you return to at night, the ones that run behind your worries, the ones that accompany your deepest longings or fears. These inner images are blueprints. The field receives them before it ever receives action, and slowly, subtly, they begin to carve out possibilities. You begin to move toward the images you believe are real, even when you don't know you're doing it. This is why people sabotage their own desires. They may say with words that they want something beautiful, but the image they hold of themselves is still small, ashamed, or disconnected. The inner movie contradicts the outer request. And the field mirrors the dominant image, not the loudest voice. You do not manifest what you ask for once. You manifest what you imagine often. Your imagination builds resonance, and resonance is what reality follows. So pause for a moment and ask, what do I repeatedly imagine about myself? What pictures am I playing on the inner screen of my life? When I think about my future, what do I see? Not what you want to see, what you actually see. That image is what is shaping your vibration. And that vibration is making its way back to you. But here's the beauty. You can change the image. You are not stuck with the pictures you inherited. You can replace them. Not by force, but by returning, gently, deliberately, again and again, to something truer. Imagine a version of yourself who is not weighed down by survival. Imagine yourself sitting in peace, not needing to prove anything. Imagine your hands open, your heart soft, your path clear. This image is not pretend, it is permission. And when you give yourself permission to imagine something more loving, more true, more aligned, your system responds. The nervous system softens, the body shifts, the emotions settle, the energy becomes coherent, and the field responds to that. Imagination is coherence in motion. It makes the abstract tangible. It brings distant frequencies into the body, where they can be felt, integrated, and expressed, and the field listens to what is embodied. So take your imagination seriously, not solemnly, not with pressure, but with reverence. You are not daydreaming. You are designing. Your inner world is where the blueprint is drawn. You do not need to wait for proof. You are allowed to imagine something greater than what your history tells you is likely. That is how you break cycles. That is how you outgrow the old rhythm. That is how you change everything. By seeing what no one else dared to see, and trusting that the act of seeing it is the beginning of receiving it. And yes, there will be resistance. The first time you imagine a new way of being, the old voice will whisper, "This is foolish." It will remind you of everything that didn't work, everything that hurt, everything that disappointed you. That voice is not your enemy. It is your history. It speaks because it's afraid of change, but you are no longer a prisoner of what once was. You are a participant in what is forming now. You do not need to silence the voice. You only need to speak another one alongside it. Let the new image speak. Let it shine quietly. Let it grow stronger each time you return to it. Over time, the old voice will grow quieter, not because you fought it, but because you stopped feeding it. And the new voice, the one that holds grace, clarity, and possibility, will begin to lead. There is a reason ancient traditions used visualization as spiritual practice. It is not new. It is not modern self-help. It is ancestral, sacred, time-tested. To imagine is to invoke. To invoke is to call forth. And what you call forth has no choice but to begin its journey toward you. You may not know how. You may not know when. But the act of imagining it sincerely sends it into motion. So what are you willing to imagine now? Not what feels polite, not what feels modest, but what feels true. Imagine yourself free of the shame that made you small. Imagine yourself remembered by your own soul. Imagine yourself safe, even when the world is uncertain. Imagine what your breath would feel like if you stopped trying to deserve your place here. Imagine what your hands would build if they weren't trying to earn survival. This is not a fantasy. This is you, tuning into a different signal. And every time you return to that signal, your system aligns with it more fully. That alignment becomes habit. That habit becomes rhythm. That rhythm becomes magnetism. And suddenly, what was once only an image starts to feel inevitable. That is the hidden power of imagination. It does not just reveal what is possible. It creates the conditions for it. The mind rehearses what the heart eventually allows, and the field echoes back what the heart believes is true. So begin with one picture, one image, one honest, loving vision of who you might be, if nothing stood in the way, and let it return to you, because it will. Part 7. Rethinking everything. There comes a moment in your path when you are no longer satisfied with adjusting a few thoughts or rearranging old beliefs. Something deeper calls you, something quieter yet more radical. It asks you not just to think better, but to rethink everything. Not out of rebellion, not out of defiance, but out of the quiet awareness that the thoughts you inherited may have been too small for the truth of who you are. To rethink everything is not to discard all that has shaped you. It is to examine it, to hold it in your awareness and ask, is this thought still worthy of me? That question is not arrogant. It is sacred. It honors your evolution. It respects your expanding clarity. And it brings you back to the place where true power lives, the origin point of choice. You were taught many things, some explicitly, some through the air around you. You were taught how to define success, what to fear, how to relate to your own body, what it means to be loved, what failure looks like, what is safe, what is impossible. These teachings may have helped you survive, but survival is not the same as truth. Survival teaches you to conform. Truth asks you to awaken. To awaken is to question the thoughts that have gone unquestioned. A thought like, I must prove my worth through work. Or, if I speak honestly, I will be left behind. Or, my sensitivity is a weakness. Or, healing takes forever. Or, I will always carry this pain. These thoughts may have passed through you so often, they now feel like facts. But they are not facts. They are mental habits, and any habit can be changed. To rethink everything means you become willing to start over, not in your outer life, but in your inner agreements. You revisit the mental contracts you made with yourself, with others, with the world. And you ask, one by one, is this mine? Did I choose this? Does this thought align with the life I now choose to live? This is not easy work, but it is liberating, because the thoughts you no longer examine become the ceilings you live beneath. And once you begin to rethink them, the ceiling vanishes. There is only space, and in that space, something new is allowed to emerge. This is where creative energy floods in, not from effort, from openness. When you stop insisting that everything you once believed must remain true, the field of possibility opens again, and in that openness, you are no longer bound by what you have known. You are guided by what you are willing to know next. You do not need to have all the answers. You only need to ask better questions. Questions like, what if ease is not earned but natural? What if the version of me I am trying to become is not ahead of me, but already inside me? What if I am not broken? What if everything that fell apart did so to make room for what actually fits? What if life is not testing me, but inviting me? These questions rewire your awareness. They soften the rigidity of old patterns. They loosen the grip of shame. They open the window a little wider, letting light into places that were closed for years. You cannot think a new life into being if you are still loyal to the thoughts that once dimmed your light. So loyalty must shift from old patterns to present awareness. Loyalty to your pain kept you safe. Loyalty to your truth will set you free. And freedom begins in the mind. Not the kind of freedom that means no responsibility, but the kind that means you are no longer bound by falsehood. The kind of freedom that makes you quiet and still, because you are no longer arguing with what you feel. You are simply aware of it. You are no longer afraid of your thoughts. You are aware that they are tools, not masters. When you begin to rethink everything, you become the artist again. You no longer live by default. You begin to craft, sculpt. Select. You choose thoughts that align with your clarity, not your confusion. You choose words that align with your direction, not your distraction. And life begins to mirror that inner artistry. Not because the world suddenly becomes easy, but because your orientation has changed. You are no longer facing backward, building from memory. You are facing inward, building from presence. The difference is everything. From this place, even the hard moments feel different. You do not need to interpret pain as failure. You can see it as movement. You do not need to collapse when things fall apart. You can pause and reorient. You do not need to silence your fear. You can speak to it gently and still move forward. This is what it means to live from the origin, from the first place, from the mind that is no longer clouded by scripts it did not write. That kind of mind is magnetic, not because it controls everything, but because it is coherent. It sends a clear signal into the field, and that signal is answered, not because you are lucky, but because you are in rhythm with the truth you chose. And when you live in rhythm with truth, you no longer chase things. You remember who you are, and the rest begins to arrive. So what thought will you think now? Not the safest one, not the most socially acceptable one, not the one that protects your wounds, but the one that speaks to the future you are already beginning to live. That thought may feel small at first. It may not sound revolutionary, but it will carry the frequency of you, the real you, the whole you, the one you have always been beneath the noise. And that thought will grow, because thoughts, when nurtured, do not stay still. They move, they gather light, they draw toward them the circumstances that echo their tone. They create pathways. They change you. This is why everything begins in the mind, because the mind is the garden, and you are the one who decides what is planted. You are allowed to plant different seeds now. Seeds of kindness, of clarity, of inner authority, of light. And if the ground is dry, let it be so. It only means the soil is ready for something new. So go ahead, rethink everything. Not because you have to, but because you are finally free to. Thank you for being here. If something in today's reflection stirred your awareness, softened a thought, or simply gave you pause, let it stay with you. If you find this podcast resourceful or helpful in any way, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need stillness more than advice. And until we meet again, may your thoughts be kind, your breath be steady, and your inner world be honored as sacred.